everybody, today I wanted to make a sit down chatty video basically because I wanted to have a chat about something. I wanted to talk about why I think that self-diagnosis with neurodiversity, so whether that's autism or ADHD or dyspraxia or whatever it might be, why that's valid, why it's important, and why it needs to be talked about. Because I mean, you know me, you know that I think that sharing stories is really important. It's how humans communicate and learn and all of that. And I wanted to share my experience. I'm no expert in this. I'm not, you know, a medical professional. This is purely my opinions and experience. But I think that in the wake of the Panorama documentary, there's been a lot of talk about formal diagnosis, and I'm not going to talk about that. I don't have an experience of that, but I also think that that has led to discussions about self-diagnosis too. And there are people who would say that diagnosing yourself based on things that you have read, or in particular, I think things that you've seen on social media, because obviously if you are looking at things that you're interested in, and then so maybe you read something about autism or ADHD, and those are the kind of videos or content that you're pausing on, then the algorithm is going to give you more of that, so you receive a whole load of content. And some people would say that if you're seeing a lot of information about something and you identify with some of those characteristics, that could lead you to diagnose yourself, to identify with that particular thing, and that you can get that confirmation bias, that you're kind of discarding the things that you don't identify with, and that you're kind of seeking that, you know, yes, that's me, and that self-diagnosis, and actually it's not a formal diagnosis, and so therefore it's not real. It's social media, it's, you know, like echo chambers and all that stuff. And I can see where people are coming from. I think it's important to see everybody's side in a thing. But in my opinion, self-diagnosis is really, really important and shouldn't just be negated. And I'll tell you why. When I was a kid, there wasn't really much diagnosis. I'm 39, and I can think of maybe some people who had dyslexia. I don't think I knew anyone diagnosed autistic or ADHD, but there are numerous of the people that I went to school with who as adults have been diagnosed. And when you look back, you know, I work in education, so I teach children and have taught children for a number of years, you know, who are diagnosed with various things. And I look back and I can see the similarities. But when I was a kid, it wasn't a thing that people understood very well. It wasn't a thing that people sought out. Like, you know, ADHD might be seen just as like a naughty kid that couldn't concentrate, or autism might be somebody who kind of gets bullied and doesn't cope well in social situations, you know, and not realising that diagnosis, or just understanding how you work, whether it's, you know, formal or not really. I think that my understanding of neurodiversity was very stereotypical, and I think lots of people's views are quite stereotypical until you learn more about it. So I wouldn't have identified with any kind of neurodiversity. It just wasn't something that was even really thought about. So I think there's been a lot of kind of misconceptions, a lot of people who say things from a place of not understanding. Yeah, anyway, fast forward to more recent times and having our own kids, and my children's stories are their own stories, so I'm not going to go into any kinds of details, but with my children, and I'm not going to say whether it's all of them, one of them, two of them, there are three of them, we have sought out diagnosis. It's a pathway that we've been down, that we have done a lot of, you know, reading about and learning about neurodiversity, and we've learned a lot more about it. It's something that we have experienced personally. So yeah, you learn more. And when you're looking at your children, potentially, you know, they haven't got a formal diagnosis, but looking at the potential of that and, you know, looking at, well, where do they fit? What do I see? And what do we need to support them with? And all those things. You can't help but turn that back on yourself and say, well, but then I'm like that. And I'm not autistic, or I'm not ADHD, or I'm not. And it makes you go, or am I? So I think that's really how it started, was seeing those traits in my children and then starting to turn the lens back on myself and reading more, as I say, seeing more content on social media. So initially, I would say that I identified the most with being autistic, that I can see traits in myself. In fact, I can't even maintain eye contact with a camera. I see traits in myself that align with autism, and initially that's what I probably would have said is, oh, well, I'm probably autistic, you know, I can kind of self-diagnose myself with that, very tentatively. As time went on and I learnt more and read more, I started to see more about ADHD, and with autism and ADHD, they present differently in girls. So I think it was learning about how girls present with those things, because you know, there are less girls that are diagnosed and all of that, because they mask really well. So yeah, learning about the traits in girls led me to identify more with what the traditional view that I'd seen was, which is more how boys present with these things. So I started to look at things with ADHD, and it was something I had never considered. I'd never identified with what my personal view was of ADHD. And then I saw more stuff, I read more stuff, and I was like, well, I feel seen. Because it made a lot of sense of all sorts of things. So how messy and chaotic I've always been. I'm a lot better now. I kind of put mechanisms in place so I can keep control. But when I was younger, I always had an absolutely chaotic bedroom, so much stuff. I struggled to handle it. I got really overwhelmed with it. The multiple interests that I kind of thought was maybe autism, I see it more now as ADHD. Like, I'm interested in everything, all of the things. I have all of the special interests because at the time when I'm presented with something, I think it's the best thing ever. So, yeah, and what else? Sort of time management, the complete burnout, and just, you know, being incapable of doing anything whatsoever when I get like that. The extreme hyper-focus, which for me can last weeks, months even, but I find that really affects my mental health. Like, I can keep going in that really, really kind of almost obsessive, I guess, focus on something, but then I will just completely crash out. I'm just constantly kind of up and down, you know. For books, you know, I can really focus on a project when it's in a particular phase where I'm doing a lot with it and being sort of constant hyper focus. It's the only thing that I want to do. And then I get to a point where I can't, and my brain is all over the place. I have constant noise. I find it really hard to stop. And if anything, there's so much going on in my head. There's things I'm interested in. There's what happened and music and blah, 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 like things all the time. So I really identify very strongly with that set of characteristics. Again, this is from what I have read. I am not an expert on any of these things. And I remember saying to my husband, do you know, I've been reading a lot about ADHD recently, and I actually think maybe I'm not autistic, I'm ADHD, or maybe a little bit of both. And he was like, you don't think? Or you think? Yeah, so I would say that felt like a really good fit for me. And so again, I might say to people, well, maybe I have ADHD, or I feel that, you know, I have ADHD. I don't like phrase it that it's not a certainty, like I probably have it or I think I have it. More recently, literally in the last couple of months, I suddenly realised that actually I probably have dyspraxia. I knew nothing about dyspraxia, nothing at all, nothing. And I just ended up looking it up because somebody said something to me. And again, I read through all this stuff and went, yep. Well, that sounds exactly like me. I can get lost anywhere. I can't remember directions at all. Like, I might have gone somewhere loads of times, unless it's a fairly immediately afterwards I go again, it's gone. That information isn't there anymore. I once got lost in a toilet because I couldn't figure out where the door was. I just was completely lost because there were all these doors to the stalls, and I ended up there for ages. Hotels, I'm really notorious for walking out of my hotel room and having not a clue where I am. So there's that. There's also, in learning physical things, I really struggle to either sequence lots of movements or to do a movement that involves lots of different parts of my body's doing different doing different things. So when I learn karate, for instance, I can't, if it's something where your arm's here and that arm's there and that leg's doing that, and don't forget to keep your spine straight and all of that, it takes me a really long time to get all of those things in place. And it's quite likely that I will have, you know, my arms the wrong way around or something because I can't coordinate all of that. I also find it really hard to translate what somebody else's body is doing into what my body should be doing. So if someone demonstrates something, I can't just copy it. So one of my kids is amazing at that and just see something, does it. I really struggle. I have to have the person in front of me facing the same way as me. They may have to show me multiple times. I may have to go right, left arm there, right arm there. And I'll often say, oh, I don't know my left and right, but I do. I do know my left and right, but when I'm looking at something, it's like it doesn't translate. So yeah, I was always rubbish at sports. I can't catch a ball, may also partially be my eyesight. I find it takes a long time for me to learn something. I sometimes can't manage the most basic of physical tasks, like, I don't know, screwing a lid on or something. I just can't do it sometimes. So all of these things that I thought was just me, that I was like this chaotic whirlwind kind of person that always leaves all the doors open and there's mess everywhere, forgets to do things are just in one ear out the other. I can't physically, I'm just a mess. I bang into things, I trip over, like I had all of this stuff I just thought was just me. So all that said, why does it matter then that I've read things, I've seen things, and I've gone, actually, where I feel personally I fit, this is no diagnosis, this is just personal from what I've read, I identify with ADHD and dyspraxia the most strongly out of all the things that I have read about. So why does that matter? Well, the fact that I have done lots of research and I've read lots of things means that there is some validity to what I'm saying. Somebody who doesn't experience any of those things is not going to start seeking out information. The fact I am looking at it, I'm trying to find answers, is because I struggle. I struggle to do physical tasks. I struggle to organise my time. My head is a lot sometimes, and you know, I suffer frequent burnout and all of these things, and understanding that is part of why I'm seeking these things out. So sure, you could say that maybe I will read things and just pick out the things that I do identify with and ignore the things that I don't. But I don't think I do that, for a start. But also I think that everybody will have particular profiles, I guess, that have some of those characteristics and not all of them. There's not like this is an autistic person. That's not how it works. Different people will have stronger emphases on certain things than others, and so we're all different, and just seeing a collection of things that explain how your brain works, I cannot tell you, every time I made that connection and went, maybe that's me, that felt really good. It didn't, you know, make me feel like, oh, something's been like wrong with me. It made me feel like I get it. Like I've lived all these years with not feeling like I'm not like other people, And I'm not. Like, not just because we're all different, but because my brain literally doesn't function like other people's brains do. And I am convinced that if I went and had formal diagnosis, that there would be some stuff going on. And so I do think it's valid. I do think that people are looking for information, they're doing research, they're finding lots out about these things, and they are looking back at their lives and reflecting and making sense of oftentimes lives that may have been fraught, difficult. You know, for me, I was really badly bullied. I just have always struggled with, as I say, like organisation, running a home, doing things on time, like just stuff that people can do and I find really hard. So all those periods of burnout and emotion and all of that, being able to explain that is a reason why people are seeking all this information out. And if you hadn't experienced those things and you weren't reflecting back at that kind of life experience and reading up about it and trying to find answers, like, you just wouldn't. If that wasn't your experience, you just wouldn't. The experience wouldn't be there, the information wouldn't be there. So I think it is valid. And when I say valid, I don't mean that it's equal to a formal diagnosis. I just mean that somebody saying, I think this is true, isn't something you can just say, well, you know, you weren't told that by a professional, so it's not real. Because the other side of things is that diagnosis takes such a long time, can be really expensive if people go down a private route, and it may be something that somebody doesn't want to do. You don't want to engage in it. Personally, I don't feel I need to. I don't need a formal diagnosis for any reason other than I'd be interested. And just for the fact that because I'm slightly interested is not going to make me go through that process. I'm looking at it for my children because for them, they might get support at school, it might help them with exams and things like that. So I can see that for them, that could be far more useful than it is for me. For me, it's enough just to feel that I understand myself, and also that I can say to somebody else, I think I have ADHD and dyspraxia, and so somebody else can understand what I'm trying to say. And that is why I think it's important. I'll give you an example. I have done karate for 20 years on and off, and over the years I have had a few instructors, absolutely not all of them, but just a couple over the years that I've come into contact with who are so frustrated at trying to teach me something when I turn up and I'm wearing a black belt and they expect a certain level of competence and they try and teach me something new. It might be something that they think is really easy, but if there's a lot of left and right or a number of movements that have to be strung together, I can't do it. And it was only recently that I had a conversation with my current sensei, who is absolutely amazing. And we had a chat, I can't remember why it came up, where I said to him, well, you know, of course, I think I have dyspraxia. And he was like, really? So what's that like for you? And I explained how I experience it, what I find hard when I'm training, about how it takes me so long to learn things, and then I might have learned it and then the next week I can't do it, I can't remember it, about how I struggle to copy other people, all of the things that I find really hard physically. And he was like, okay, so how do I support you with that? So I was like, okay, if you're demonstrating something, I would really appreciate it if you're directly in front of me. I know obviously there's other people here, but if at least some of the time, or if you can see I'm struggling with something in particular, if you're in front of me, I find it so much easier to copy you, and ideally you're facing the same way as I am. That would be really, really helpful. And also if you could just be really patient, because I'll get there. I'll get there in the end. I'll keep on trying because I love this, and you know, I'll do it, but it might take me a really long time. And it's not because I don't try, because that's been something I've been accused of in the past. I don't try, I don't care, I don't, you know, I do. I do try. I probably try harder than a lot of other people. So, you know, be patient with me, understand it's just my brain. And he was like, okay, yeah, cool. and he's made those adjustments. I mean, he was always incredibly patient anyway. But as I say, over the years, I've come across people who are like, well, why don't you know this? Why can't you remember that? I've shown you this. Come on. You should be better than this. You're a black belt. I'm a black belt, but it took me a lot to get there. And so just being able to say to somebody, well, this isn't formal, but I think this, meant that he could make those adjustments. Two adults having that conversation, and now things are easier for me. And I don't feel so anxious about mucking it up because I know he understands. So I feel a lot calmer and better understood. And I also feel that going forward, when I come across people I don't know within the karate world who get frustrated with me, I can say, oh, sorry, I'm dyspraxic. And I don't have to say, or diagnose dyspraxic. I can just say I'm dyspraxic, and somebody else can go, oh, okay. And then somebody has a picture of what that means. They can then make some adjustments. Being able to just say that word, dyspraxic. Oh, right, I get it, cool. You know, that just means that somebody else can understand what I'm trying to convey. Like, these are the things I find hard. And another example is with ADHD. So since I said to my husband, you know, I think actually maybe I'm not autistic, I maybe actually have ADHD. And he was like, that would make a lot of sense. I feel like since then he has a better understanding of my chaos. So he will, he's a lot more patient with me forgetting things that I've been reminded of, with me just being messy in the sense of putting things down and I've forgotten it's there, and just being a whirlwind basically, and understanding my need to put things in place so I can remember to do things and not get overwhelmed, but also that in itself is quite difficult. I just think that he kind of gets that I'm not trying to be annoying. Like, I want to remember these things. I want to be tidy. I want to, you know, I would like not to be so chaotic, but I'm not, and it's not an intentional thing. And I think it's really helped our relationship because it just really helps for someone else to understand you. And another example is that I get really tired because of the amount of stuff that I'm processing all of the time. And if I've had a busy day where I've had a lot of thinking, like basically if I've been working, at the end of the day, I'm just good for nothing. I am done. I just can't function. And he gets that. He gets that. If he's like, oh, well, we could do with sorting out X, Y, Z, I'm just like, no. And the highest energy time for me is probably in the morning, and then I might peak and then it's just gone. It's just, there's nothing left. So again, just being able to work with the rhythms of the day, understanding that somebody else might be exhausted when you don't feel that way, and that's not anything other than just that's the way that they work, you know. And that's the point I'm trying to make. And I'm sorry this is really rambly. I have no notes. This is just me blur at the camera, but it's why I think it's important, because you can communicate to somebody, whether it's your partner, your family members, your place of work, you know, whatever, and say to them, I have insert thing here and I find it really hard to do this. And, you know, for that to be understood, for that not to be taken as, oh, well, they're just lazy, or they're coming up with an excuse, for that to be understood that I am trying to tell you that my brain does not work the same way as yours, and it would be really helpful if you could make these accommodations for me. So it could be, I really need you to write things down because I don't understand verbal directions. Or it could be, like I said, somebody showing you something physically in an orientation that you understand. Somebody being patient if you say, I'm sorry, could you explain that again? Somebody being patient that you had the best of intentions, but you just, you're chaotic. Because of course all of these things come with enormous positives as well. Personally, I am really highly productive at certain times, and then also not productive at all at others. I have massive interest in so many things. I'm really passionate about loads and loads of different things. I'm highly creative, but on the flip side of that, I also get really tired, and like I said, things can be a lot. So yeah, my point is, if somebody has gone to the effort of researching something, reflecting on their life, looking at their own experiences, trying to align those things, coming to the conclusion that actually they really identify with that thing, making the choice that they don't want to or they don't need to seek formal diagnosis, but that they choose to tell you, to disclose to you, well, actually, I have whatever, that is really valid, and that it's really important to take it seriously and to, you know, make accommodations that are asked for. Because at the end of the day, even if I had none of these neurodiverse things whatsoever, and I am a neurotypical person, and I just say, do you know what, I find it really hard to, if you do this thing, or it would be really nice if you could do this. Just like, do the thing, you know, just do the thing. Just be nice. At the end of the day, that's all it's asking for. It's asking for understanding, compassion, and just trying to make everybody's life a little bit easier, understanding one another, being kind. Like, what's the problem here? So that's why I think it's really important, and why we should talk about it, and why we should accept it. Not everybody wants formal diagnosis or feels they need it. So like I said, somebody just saying, well, actually, is really important. And another example which has just come to me, and as I say, this is unplanned and rambly. I, as a teacher, have had numerous conversations over the last 18 months or so, since I've been back in education and since the self-diagnosis thing, of saying to a kid, oh yeah, well, I have ADHD, when they say to me, well, I have ADHD, so I struggle with, and I'm like, yeah, I know, it's really tough, me too. And for me, even though my diagnosis is self-diagnosed and theirs may not be, for them to see a person in a position of power saying, you know, I have ADHD, I think that's really important. For example, I had this one particular student, I obviously can't go into details, this was a while ago, and they said to me, you know, I would love to be a teacher, but I have ADHD, so I can't do it. And I was like, well, I have ADHD and I'm a teacher. And they were like, oh, really? Like, how do you manage? Because I find this hard and I find that hard, and, you know, I can't concentrate in class and this, that and the other. And I was like, well, that, you know, the fact that I have ADHD means that I pick up lots of different things in the classroom, that I am tracking lots of different things at once, that I can be really creative, that I am really empathetic with, you know, the sort of different characteristics of all the different students, and that it doesn't need to stop them. And I think that people in positions, you know, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a manager, whether it's whatever, whether it's a parent, like whoever, saying, well, yeah, me too, is important. And, you know, a lot of adults are not diagnosed because we weren't. So being able to actually be part of that conversation and empathise and connect, again, that's also really, really important. So I just think that self-diagnosis is a really good thing and shouldn't be viewed as a bad thing or something to look down on. It's a really, really good thing. And for me, it's been really life-changing. I feel more at peace since deciding that I aligned with those things, and understanding that my brain just works a bit differently, and that's totally fine, you know, and that I can just make accommodations to make my life easier and forgive myself. And it really does bring me peace. And I think for a lot of people, it probably does the same thing and gives us a lot of explanation. For some of us, for a lot of trauma in our youth. So yeah, that's my point. My rambly point. I'm sorry there would have been so many cuts in this as well, because my train of thought has been interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments, and hit like if you enjoyed this. I know it's something different, but I like to share things that are important to me. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon for another video. Take care.